Good evening, everyone. I'm your guide for tonight, here to weave tales that will take you on a journey into the eerie and unsettling world of road trip horror stories. Before we embark on this adventure, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give the video a thumbs up. I'd be thrilled to hear where you're tuning in from and what time it is, so feel free to share in the comments. Now, when you're ready, settle in and let yourself unwind. I'd always been skeptical about online dating, viewing it as a realm reserved for two kinds of individuals, those yearning for love and those seeking fleeting connections. This perspective came from a woman who had spent 5 years married to what everyone deemed the ideal partner, including myself. Yet, I came to realize that perfection is an illusion, and the more flawless someone appears, the more likely there are shadows lurking beneath that surface. I had to confront this truth in a way that was far from easy when I realized that the person I had deeply loved and pledged my heart to at the altar had a preference for other men. Throughout our time together, he had been unfaithful with numerous men he met through online dating sites. As you can imagine, this revelation was a crushing blow, and the divorce process proved to be even more painful. After swallowing that bitter truth, I entered a phase where I completely shut myself off from love. I had no desire to meet anyone or date again. I was completely shut off from the idea of meeting someone new, worried about the pain of heartbreak once more. My friends kept urging me to consider giving love another shot, even going so far as to introduce me to a few potential matches, but nothing ever materialized. After nearly 2 years of solitude, my friends decided I had endured enough time alone, and without my consent, they created a Tinder profile for me. Initially, I was livid. It felt like a total disregard for my feelings that they would take such a step without discussing it with me. However, after some time in the conversation, I realized they had a point. It was indeed time to embrace love anew, or at the very least, start connecting with others and enjoying life. After all, solitude had not been the most pleasant companion. The girls introduced me to the app and guided me on how to navigate it. I could tell they assumed that once they left my place, I would erase my profile. I did contemplate it, but ultimately I held off. A couple of weeks passed, and one afternoon, feeling a bit restless and having indulged in a few glasses of wine, I found myself revisiting the app on my phone and thought to myself. Initially, I was taken aback by the number of likes my profile received. It was unexpected. I began to explore the profiles and photos of those who had viewed mine, but none caught my attention. Just as I was about to give up and set my phone down to enjoy my drink, I stumbled upon Alvaro's profile. From the moment I laid eyes on his picture, there was an instant connection. He was strikingly handsome, with dark hair and well-defined features, complemented by a charming smile and an intense gaze. I believe that was what drew me in right away. He exuded an aura of mystery and allure that no woman could overlook. Alvaro appeared to be in his 30s and had a rather succinct profile description, which mentioned his love for nature, art, and evening strolls in delightful company. Without hesitation, I matched with him, and to my utter astonishment, just moments later, I received his initial message. "Hi Paula, I would like to meet you." Oh my God, I was filled with excitement. It was utterly wild how I felt because this was a person I had only glimpsed in a photograph. Yet for some inexplicable reason, he sparked an instant intrigue within me. I found myself responding without hesitation, and soon we were engaged in conversation, chatting for nearly the entire night and exchanging numbers. Everything unfolded at a rapid pace. He was undeniably charming and articulate. We seemed to share numerous interests, or at least he led me to believe so. Ultimately, after our lengthy discussion, he expressed a desire to meet in person and invited me to a popular Italian restaurant in the city. That day, I arrived at work feeling wide awake. Throughout the day, my mind was consumed by thoughts of that meeting. It reminded me of the excitement and anxiety I felt on my first date with my ex-husband. Reflecting on that day now makes me feel a bit foolish. It's astonishing that, at nearly 30 and having gone through a bitter divorce, I still held on to such naivety and trust. I returned home early eager to prepare and look my best for the occasion. Naturally, I selected my finest outfit, let my hair down, and straightened it to achieve that fabulous look. I even applied my signature makeup, the kind I reserve for special moments. I wanted to make an impact. Dressed to impress, I arrived at the restaurant slightly ahead of schedule. As I stepped out of the cab, I spotted him from a distance, waiting at the entrance. He was even more striking in person, impeccably dressed in a white shirt that accentuated his skin tone and dark jeans. He welcomed me with a warm hug and a kiss on the cheek, instantly putting me at ease. The dinner was delightful. Alvaro was charming and appeared to have a wealth of knowledge about art and literature, and everything flowed seamlessly. Everything was going smoothly until an unsettling incident occurred. At one point, the waitress who served our plates stumbled, nearly dropping the food on him. Thankfully, nothing happened, but his reaction struck me as excessively aggressive towards her. He abruptly stood up and began shouting at her, calling her an idiot for almost spilling pasta on him. He was a large man, looming over this petite girl with an intimidating stance, almost as if he were about to strike her. Despite her repeated apologies, continued to make hurtful remarks until I stepped in and requested he take a breath. In that moment, he seemed to grasp the gravity of his behavior, quickly shifting his demeanor, offering a smile as if to dismiss the tension, and apologizing to the waitress, which truly upset me. It was an odd and overwhelming incident. He had been so cheerful and friendly that I never imagined he could exhibit such a hostile side. From that point forward, the mood shifted. He attempted to bring back the lightheartedness of our discussion, but I was genuinely taken aback, yet I chose to proceed with the evening to avoid making things worse. Aside from that, the dinner was delightful, and he made a real effort to ensure I felt at ease. Afterwards, he suggested we extend the night with a drink or a walk, but I graciously declined, citing work commitments for the next day. I quickly bid him farewell with a kiss on the cheek. However, as I was leaving, Alo took my hand and asked me to forgive him for what had transpired. He acknowledged his behavior from earlier, expressing understanding of the situation. He shared that his day had been awful, and I was the sole bright spot in it. He expressed a desire not to let his clumsiness ruin our moment. Then he invited me for a walk in his favorite park nearby, describing its beauty in the evening. I recalled his profile, mentioning a fondness for night walks. He assured me he would take me home afterwards. For a brief moment, I hesitated, but despite how foolish it seemed, I found myself believing him and agreed to join him like a cow to the slaughter. We arrived at the place, and yes, the truth is that it was really beautiful. The moon was clear, and the way it illuminated the trees and the cobblestone paths was simply spectacular. As we walked, we talked about everything from our hobbies to our deepest dreams. However, as we went along, an uneasy feeling came over me. It was like a kind of alert that my intuition emitted, and with every step I took, it was screaming at me that something was not right. As we walked and chatted, Alvaro led us further and further away. From the main trail, we ventured deeper into the wooded area, reaching the darkest and most remote part of the park. I paused for a moment, attempting to mask the nervousness that was creeping in. I asked him where we were headed, and he looked at me with a kind expression, saying, "Trust me." Once again, I was captivated by his deep and enchanting gaze, and just like that, I dismissed all my instincts and followed him further into the forest. However, the enchantment shattered in an instant. At one point, while we continued walking, as I chattered away about my future aspirations and the wonderful things that lay ahead, I noticed Alvaro lingering behind me. When I turned to look at him, a massive piece of wood suddenly hurtled towards my face. Instinct kicked in, and I raised my hands to shield myself just as Alvaro struck. I fell backwards, disoriented and feeling a sharp pain on the right side of my head and in my hands. I could barely manage to utter a few words before Alvaro lunged at me, and began to squeeze my neck, shouting expletives at him. I couldn't breathe, and with his weight on top of me, I couldn't move either. But I struggled with all my might to break free from his grip. Then I remembered something I'd seen on TV and realized that this was the perfect time to find out if it really worked. As best I could, I grabbed a handful of dirt and threw it in his face. He immediately started screaming and squeezing his eyes shut. In that moment, I knew I would not have another chance to escape alive from that place. So, with every ounce of breath I had left and adrenaline coursing through my veins, I sprinted as fast as I could, desperately trying to recall the path we had taken. For a moment, I could hear his footsteps pounding behind me, but then silence enveloped me. I pushed forward, finally reaching the main road, where I waved down the first car that appeared. To my relief, it stopped. The driver, an elderly man, widened his eyes in shock upon seeing me. I felt the warmth of blood on my face, and when I glanced at my hands, they were smeared with it. Before he could utter a word, I urgently pleaded, "Get me out of here, quick!" The man grasped the situation instantly, assisting me into the car and speeding away. Once inside, words caught in my throat as I recounted the events to Grandpa, who continuously reassured me that everything would be all right while he navigated towards the nearest police station. Upon arrival, 2 officers greeted me, ready to take my statement and offer support. I shared every detail I could recall about Alvaro, from his name to a description of his appearance, along with any other information that could aid in the investigation. I reached out to a friend from the police station, and within moments, they arrived to offer their support. Shortly after, I was taken to the hospital for medical assistance with my injuries. Thankfully, they were not serious, and the next day, I was discharged and returned home. The first thing I did was immerse myself in a hot bath, hoping to wash away the lingering feelings of dirt and fear that clung to my skin. The haunting image of those dark eyes lingers in my mind, captivating yet filled with the purest evil. I remember the first time I saw him, his gaze piercing as his hands tightened around my neck, draining my life away bit by bit. Days of panic and anguish followed until the police finally caught Alvaro, granting me a semblance of peace and the ability to sleep again. Yet, this experience etched a lesson in my soul. Never trust a stranger, no matter how charming, and always heed your instincts. When your instincts signal that something is amiss, it's because it truly is. I decided to delete my Tinder profile, and a few months later, I encountered a wonderful man in a coffee shop. We began a relationship, and to this day, we are still together. So, I did find love after all. Back in 2018, I was just an ordinary 19-year-old girl, much like any other, pursuing a university degree, working a monotonous job, and enjoying weekends out with friends, free of traumas and worries, and filled with positivity. Perspective on life and what lies ahead shifted dramatically one Saturday night when I took a leap into the realm of online dating. After a taxing week filled with college exams and my shifts at the coffee shop, I initially planned to unwind at home, indulging in Netflix and fried snacks. Yet, as the evening wore on, a restless feeling stirred within me, compelling me to seek out something new and thrilling to escape the monotony. After some contemplation, I devised a clever plan. Consider the prospect of downloading the popular dating app Tinder, especially since it seemed like everyone was on it. I thought it might be an enjoyable way to meet someone new and spend some time together. As I swiped through profiles and images of men with various tastes and backgrounds, one picture suddenly stood out to me. His name was Ivan, and he was undeniably attractive. He appeared slightly older, which intrigued me, as I had never dated older men before. He was 40, but honestly, he didn't seem that much older. He appeared to be in his 30s. Ivan was tall, fair-skinned, and had striking green eyes, exuding a mysterious, almost vampiric aura that piqued my curiosity. I quickly swiped right, and just a few minutes later, I received the notification confirming that I had matched with Ivan, indicating his interest in me. A wave of excitement washed over me, and I felt a delightful tingle as I read his first message. "Hello, Valerai. You are beautiful. I would really like to meet you. Would you like to go out with me tonight?" I didn't hesitate for a moment and accepted his invitation right away. When he inquired about my address, I suggested it would be wiser to meet at a public place instead. We settled on a charming sushi restaurant in the heart of the city. I took my time getting ready, selecting my finest dress to ensure I made a memorable impression. The anticipation was palpable as I looked forward to meeting the enigmatic man from Tinder and discovering what possibilities lay ahead. When I arrived at the venue, he was already seated at a table, just as the pictures had promised, strikingly attractive. As the evening unfolded, it became clear that his appeal extended beyond mere looks. He was charming and had a delightful sense of humor. He effortlessly maintained an engaging conversation, always ready with a clever retort to my remarks. His cultured demeanor and captivating tales from his global adventures kept me thoroughly entertained. I found his presence utterly delightful, and there was something intoxicating about his scent, adding to that enigmatic allure I had sensed. At the outset, the atmosphere was charged with an intensity that enveloped me, especially with him standing before me. By the end of the night, my attraction to him was undeniable. He embodied the essence of a true gentleman. I found myself agreeing to let him drive me home, and as we arrived, I bid him farewell with a gentle kiss on the cheek. I hesitated to part ways, yet the anticipation of seeing him again was overwhelming. So, when he suggested another meeting, I didn't think twice. This marked the beginning of a series of dates, as we continued to meet over the following weeks, each encounter filled with promise. In various public settings, restaurants, cafes, the cinema, and even a trip to the zoo, every outing with him was a delightful experience. Yvonne highlighted the stark contrast between dating a mature individual and someone my own age. Our discussions were consistently engaging and enjoyable. He possessed a wealth of knowledge that allowed us to delve into any topic with ease. My attraction to him deepened, and he made it increasingly evident that this feeling was reciprocated. However, he was granting me my time, which I found quite endearing. After several weeks, he finally invited me to his home for an intimate dinner. I accepted with delight, eager to learn more about him in a private setting, not just in the way one might think, but to understand his life. His home, I wanted to uncover everything about him. With that in mind, we arrived at his house, located in an exclusive residential area of the city. Upon arrival, I was taken aback by the sophistication of the place. The decoration was so exquisite that it resembled a scene straight from an interior design magazine. And in that moment, I came to the stark realization that my apartment was lacking and my finances were tight. Ivan poured me a glass of wine, and his charming smile reassured me that I was exactly where I needed to be. The dinner was delightful, yet as the evening unfolded, I began to notice a few unsettling details. Firstly, there were peculiar symbols adorning the walls, reminiscent of something from a book on mysticism, and there were other elements that caught my attention. A pair of statuettes resembling demonic figures caught my eye, one of them seemingly fixated on me. When I inquired about them, Ivan merely chuckled, claiming they were souvenirs from his travels to exotic locales. His response lacked conviction, yet I hesitated to delve deeper. Perhaps he simply had a taste for unusual collectibles. Still, a small, nagging unease flickered within me, suggesting that something was amiss. In that place, it indeed matched the description of a vampire's dwelling. Yet, I chose to overlook it all and simply savor the evening in his company. After dinner, he led me to a private room, the most intimate corner of the enclosure. He called it cozy, though I found it rather dark and foreboding. A collection of ancient books and peculiar artifacts, seemingly from medieval times, adorned the space. He shared his passion for the occult arts and his fascination with ancient cultures. As he spoke to me about his beliefs, he turned away to search for an object he wished to show. In that moment, my gaze fell upon a book that intrigued me. Its leather cover suggested age and mystery. However, upon opening it, I was confronted with something deeply unsettling. The pages were filled with photographs of young girls, similar to my age, posed naked, their bodies adorned with the very symbols I had noticed etched into the walls of the house. They lay with their arms and legs extended over what appeared to be a pentagram, reminiscent of those used in dark rituals. Satanic rituals made me so anxious that the book slipped from my grasp, sending the photos tumbling across the floor. Ivan turned around, and in that instant, we locked eyes in a heavy silence. My heart raced uncontrollably, and my thoughts spiraled into chaos. At that moment, my body was screaming for me to flee, and I regretted not heeding those primal instincts, as it would have spared me from his captivating charm and eloquence. To soothe my bewildered mind with an explanation he was adept at providing, one that could easily sway any unsuspecting individual like myself, Ivan extended his hands before me, remaining still. He gently urged me to calm down, assuring me that it was not as I perceived. He clarified that it was a spiritual ritual, and the girls I had seen participated willingly as part of an initiation. Somehow, he managed to persuade me that there was nothing amiss, claiming he merely documented these rituals. He was drawn to such matters, expressing a particular interest in collecting items tied to the occult. He reiterated that his focus was solely on that realm. He claimed the photos were captured during a spiritual ritual he had observed in Scotland. While his explanation left me somewhat skeptical, he did present a compelling argument, and I found myself wanting to trust him, needing to. He extended his hand, and I accepted it. Then he kissed me. It was the first time he had done so. After the kiss, he inquired. He asked me if I was okay and offered to let me stay with him that night, but if I didn't feel safe, he would take me home. The truth is, when I arrived at his place, I had different expectations for the evening. However, after the incident, I felt so upset that I requested he take me back to my apartment. Like a true gentleman, he agreed and drove me to my building. During the ride, we barely spoke, yet Ivan would occasionally caress my hand and smile at me. That smile was captivating and brought a sense of calm to my entire being. However, when I stepped out of the car after the goodbye kiss, he smiled at me once more, and in that instant, I caught a glimmer in his eyes that, instead of wrapping me in comfort, sent an unsettling chill down my spine. Yet, like a true fool, I brushed it aside, but soon enough, I would learn the difficult lesson that one should never dismiss their instincts. When I arrived home, I shut the door and leaned against it, attempting to make sense of what I had witnessed that evening. No matter how hard I tried, sleep eluded me. The symbols in his home, the photographs, the peculiar markings on the bodies of those women, all felt like fragments of something beyond comprehension. Of a horror movie. As soon as I woke up, I set out to investigate more about Ivan. So I started searching the internet, checking his social media profile, and looking for anything that had to do with him, but I didn't find anything alarming or compromising. Still, for some reason, that did not reason. Sure me, there was something inside me that told me I should be cautious, but on the other hand, I wanted to trust him. I really liked Ivan, so I just left the matter and tried not to give it more thought. A few days later, I received a message from Ivan inviting me to a party at his house. He told me that it would be a special night and that he wanted me to attend as his date. At first, I hesitated a little, but then I accepted. I really wanted to forget about last time and that everything would be like before that day. So the day of the party, I dressed up very well. I put on a beautiful dress and waited for him at the entrance of my building. He didn't take long to arrive, and we left. Upon entering the place, the first thing I noticed was that there were more people than I expected. Everyone seemed to key in Ivan very well, and the atmosphere from the beginning was strange, as if there was some kind of hidden tension in the air. Once again, my intuition was telling me that I was in danger, but stubborn as always, I ignored it. Again, the night went on, and at one point Ivan took me to a secluded room and told me he had something important to show me. As I entered, I saw an altar with lighted candles and three of those strange symbols that made me feel a big knot in my stomach, even more when I saw that in the center of that altar were drawn the same symbols that I had seen in the photos he had told me he took in Scotland. My heart began to beat very fast, but I tried to keep my composure. I didn't want to show how nervous I was at that moment. Then he told me that he hadn't been completely honest with me that night, because he didn't want to scare me, and he started telling me about a group. He belonged to some kind of secret society that sought power and knowledge through ancient rituals. Hearing that, everything started to make sense. My heart began to race. Somehow, I knew that I was not there, just because then I remembered all those girls I'd seen in the pictures, and everything became clear in my mind. Those women had not been there by he had taken them, as he was doing now with me. I realized that all this time, he was simply manipulating me, preparing the ground to get to this day. I asked hi, and what this was all about, and in my question, he smiled in a very sinister way and told me that I would know everything that night. Panic started to take over me, but I pretended not to notice and tried to find an excuse to get out of that place. But before I could say anything, someone else entered the room. It was an older man with a very intimidating presence. Ivan introduced me as the special guest A. Indeed, the man told him that it was time to start. Ivan took me by the arm and led me to another room, a bigger and darker one. In the center of it, there was a circle drawn on the floor with what seemed to be salt, and suddenly a lot of people dressed in black robes started to arrive. The air began to get heavy, and for a moment, I stopped feeling my legs. I tried to let go of Ivan, but he held me very tightly. I was panicking, and I was no longer able to hide it. All I could think of was that I had been a complete idiot. I had all the signs in front of me, and I decided to ignore them to pursue a stupid illusion. And it was then that I saw a door ajar at the end of the room, and I took advantage of Ivan's carelessness to break free from his grip and run towards the door. I ran as fast as I could, leaving my hail scattered across the hallway. The screams echoed behind me, but I didn't pause for a moment. It's astonishing what adrenaline can achieve. I've never been a remarkable runner, yet that night, I felt as if even Usain Bolt couldn't have kept pace with me. Thankfully, my spatial memory served me well. I recalled precisely where we had entered. I sprinted at full speed until I located the exit in the darkness. Emerging onto the street barefoot, I crossed over to a Japanese restaurant and called a cab to take me to the police. Once at the station, I recounted everything I had experienced, but it turned out that without concrete evidence, they could not do much. That night, I was too afraid to return to my apartment, fearing Ivan would look for me there, so I went to my parents' house. I began to investigate sex and their occult symbology. That's how I discovered that the cell to which Ivan belonged was known for making ritual sacrifices of animals. But the most radical wing was linked to cases of human sacrifices. Unfortunately, I was never able to gather enough information or evidence to incriminate Ivan. I blocked his number and deleted my Tinder profile, but fortunately for me, he never tried to contact me again. A couple of years after that terrifying incident, I learned that he had passed away in a car accident in 2020. Karma sometimes comes in unexpected ways. After almost 3 years without dating anyone following the end of my last love relationship, which ended very badly, I thought that maybe it was time to return to the love arena. I wanted to see if I was making progress this time, so I decided to give Tinder a shot. I noticed that some of my lesbian friends had success meeting people through the app. After several days of swiping left, I finally matched with a girl named Sophia. She was not only beautiful, but also seemed kind and charming. We clicked immediately over our shared love for vintage movies, which felt special since it's not something you come across often. It was delightful to connect with someone who appreciated that unique interest. Her profile radiated enthusiasm, showcasing numerous photos of her enjoying the great outdoors, whether at the beach, skiing, mountain climbing, or camping. Her bio revealed that she was new in town, navigating a demanding job while seeking to forge connections. With this in mind, I envisioned the perfect setting for our first date: the charming old movie theater in town where Hollywood classics from the 30s were screened. I hadn't been there in ages, primarily because it felt dull to go alone. I shared this idea with Sophia, and she appeared genuinely excited about the plan. I recall it was Thursday when I suggested we meet on Saturday, but she expressed a desire to see me sooner, which struck me as quite eager given it was just 2 days away. Instead, she proposed Friday, and I readily agreed. The following day, we met at the cinema as arranged. She was attractive, though perhaps not quite as stunning as in her photos. Nevertheless, she welcomed me with a warm smile, and we exchanged a kiss on the cheek. She exuded a charming presence. The girl and I enjoyed a wonderful time at the movies, watching Charles Chaplin City Lights. As the film played, we engaged in a lively discussion about our favorite movies from that era, jokingly suggesting that we might be reincarnated souls from those times. I observed that while Sophia initially appeared shy and reserved, often leaving it to me to steer the conversation, she gradually became more relaxed and started to share her thoughts more freely as our interaction unfolded. As the evening progressed, her confidence blossomed. She became increasingly talkative and engaging, even sharing more about her personal life than perhaps necessary. She rambled on about her new job, her difficult coworkers, and the stress she felt when the movie ended. Despite having a pleasant time, I found myself ready to head home. However, with her usual enthusiasm, she proposed we continue the night at the old dive bar next door for a drink. Until that moment, I had truly been enjoying the date and hadn't noticed there were no indications from her that anything was amiss. So I thought it was fine to go for drinks, despite my lack of enthusiasm for the venue and alcoholic drinks. However, that decision turned out to be one of the gravest errors I've ever made. Reflecting on that night, I can't help but wonder how differently things might have unfolded if I had simply declined and returned home. But as the saying goes, what's done is done. Once we arrived at the bar, we settled onto a pair of wooden stools and each ordered beer. With the music blaring, we found ourselves leaning in closer to hear one another. Engaging in conversation was manageable until Sophia began to push the limits in a noticeable manner, which initially made me uneasy. It started with subtle physical contact, like her leaning on my shoulder while whispering in my ear or occasionally touching my arm. However, as the evening wore on, she escalated her actions, even placing her hand on my lower back and keeping it there. While I didn't have any negative feelings towards her, the lack of trust between us made me uncomfortable with such intimacy. Contact was a delicate matter. I sensed she was overstepping, yet I hesitated to express my discomfort directly, not wanting to create an awkward situation. Each time she reached out in ways I found unwelcome, I subtly shifted on my stool, hoping to convey my unease. It seemed, however, that she either missed the cues or chose to disregard them. This was not the sole source of my discomfort. Gradually, Sophia began to steer our light exchanges into realms that felt far too personal and inappropriate. In a rather intrusive manner, she began to probe into my past relationships, my dating preferences, and my views on commitment and family. It felt as though she was seeking intimate details of my life that I wasn't ready to divulge to someone I barely knew. The level of invasiveness reached a point where she even inquired about my taste in intimacy. Sensing the conversation was taking an uncomfortable turn, I chose to respond vaguely and politely, attempting to steer the discussion towards safer topics, as I was genuinely feeling uneasy. After less than an hour at the bar, what had started as a fun and enjoyable evening quickly turned tense, uncomfortable, and truly disturbing. So, as soon as I finished my beer, I politely announced that I needed to go home, left cash at the bar for my drink, and said goodbye with a simple, "I had a good time. Thanks for the evening." However, as I was leaving, Sophia hurriedly finished her beer and insisted on walking me home, arguing that it was dark outside and could be dangerous. It was barely 8 o'clock at night, and the lights still lingered in the city center, a bustling area filled with people. For her, returning alone could pose risks, yet she felt compelled to accompany me. This insistence raised red flags. Her probing questions, unwelcome touches, and now this desire to walk me home made me uneasy. I didn't want to come off as rude, so I attempted to decline politely but firmly. Then she expressed her wish to spend more time with me because I found myself with nothing to occupy my time, and I was the only pleasant person she had encountered recently. Ultimately, I agreed, but rather than enjoying a delightful conversation like in the films, we trudged along in an uncomfortable silence for several blocks on our way to my apartment. I was eager to put this awkward evening behind me. As soon as I spotted the entrance half a block away, Sophia rushed ahead and abruptly halted in front of me on the sidewalk. I hardly had a chance to respond when she began inquiring if she could stay at my apartment with me, since I lived far away with roommates. rarely finding a moment of solitude. In a state of shock, I struggled to comprehend the proposal being thrust upon me by someone I had only just met hours before. She seized my wrist with a grip that felt almost desperate, and as I attempted to pull away, Sophia pleaded with me in a tone that dripped with desperation, urging me to reconsider and let her accompany me to the apartment. Her grip tightened around my arm, and I was taken aback by her unexpected strength, no matter how fiercely I fought against it. I found myself unable to break free. In that moment, I found myself trapped in her grip, a wave of fear washing over me. I urgently pleaded for her to release me, and the distraction worked. As soon as her hold loosened, I bolted towards the building's entrance. My heart raced as I heard her voice behind me, a mix of harassment and desperation. My hands trembled as I stepped into the lobby and pressed the elevator button, my eyes glued to the window, watching in disbelief as Sophia moved erratically down the sidewalk until she finally stormed away. As soon as I entered my apartment, I locked the door and lay on my back on the bed, attempting to process the whirlwind of events that had just unfolded. A wave of nervousness washed over me. This woman was utterly unhinged, and now I knew her address. I felt foolish for having allowed her to accompany me. In the days that followed this harrowing encounter, I couldn't shake the suffocating sensation of being watched wherever I went. I was uncertain if it was merely my paranoia or if she was indeed trailing me. My worst fears materialized one morning as I prepared for work, and as I was on the verge of exiting the building when my gaze landed on Sophia, perched at the bus stop just across the street. In that instant, a knot twisted in my stomach, and my heart raced uncontrollably. Panic surged through me, compelling me to retreat to my apartment. I called into work, feigning illness, unable to muster the strength to face the day. The turmoil left me too shaken to think straight. Not long after that unsettling episode, I returned home to discover a package waiting on my doorstep, accompanied by a handwritten note addressed to my Tinder. Despite my better judgment, I opened it, and what I found inside were items that referenced our date: the movie ticket, a picture of Charlie Chaplin, and a selfie we took in the theater while waiting for the movie to start. If I was nervous before, now I was completely terrified by Sophia's harassing behavior. She was really freaking me out. I didn't think any longer, and that same day, I went straight to the police station. I detailed everything that was happening and provided them with all the information I had, including the box she left at my house, conversations on Tinder, and her relentless messages, which I had no desire to see after our date. Ultimately provided the authorities with the evidence they needed to locate her and issue a restraining order, barring her from approaching or interacting with me again. I must admit that even weeks after the police intervention brought some closure, I still felt that unsettling sensation of being watched. I found myself glancing over my shoulder as I walked, an overwhelming feeling that lingered long after the incident. This experience has instilled in me a heightened sense of caution and awareness regarding my interactions with others. Most importantly, it has reinforced the importance of recognizing warning signs, regardless of how trivial they might appear. Thankfully, I never heard from Sophia again. I never anticipated that my life could spiral into such chaos simply from downloading a dating app. I was navigating a period of significant change, relocating to a new city, switching jobs, and ending a 7-year marriage after my wife's betrayal with her so-called best friend. I had a girlfriend since she was 19, and just 2 years later, we tied the knot. I was only 21 when I proposed, but our love felt so profound that we believed we would share our lives forever. Unfortunately, it became clear that this was a commitment I was prepared to uphold alone. That realization hit me hard, but it also opened my eyes to the experiences I had overlooked while being married. Most of my friends were out there enjoying life, going to parties, meeting new people, and having fun without the complexities that came with my situation. I, on the other hand, carried the weight of a married name, along with all the responsibilities that come with it. While I was also studying, my time for distractions was limited. Unlike my ex-wife, I always held our relationship in high regard and remained faithful throughout the 9 years we spent together. After our divorce, I came to the realization that it was time to reclaim some of the time I had lost and embrace the freedom of bachelorhood as it was meant to be. It was finally time to pursue the experiences I had been deprived of during my marriage. I was seeing other women, but this time it was casual, without any commitment or romantic entanglements. A friend suggested I try the Tinder app, which you use for dates, so I decided to give it a shot. I created a profile and began using it, meeting many girls along the way and enjoying a few successful dates. I made sure to be upfront about the kind of interaction I was looking for. I never wanted to toy with anyone's feelings or expectations. About 4 months into using the app, I finally made a match. There was a girl named Marta. She had beautiful brunette curly hair and an undeniable charm that instantly drew me in. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, and we exchanged numbers, her playful nature adding a spark to our exchanges. Intrigued by her wit, I suggested we meet that very night. She initially requested my address to come over, but I hesitated, opting instead to visit her place, as I wasn't entirely at ease sharing my own address just yet. She agreed, and I asked her to send me her location. Marta didn't respond immediately, which should have raised a red flag, but I was too caught up in the excitement of meeting her and spending the night together. Having never encountered issues on my dates before, I brushed off my concerns. After about 10 minutes, she replied with her current location, which was fairly close to my place. I set off shortly after, following the map to the destination. An apartment complex nestled in a suburb of the city greeted me with an air of darkness upon my arrival. The place didn't present itself in the best light, yet I was the one who had insisted on visiting her. I parked in the lot and sent her a text to announce my presence. She quickly replied, mentioning she had spotted me thanks to the directions I provided. She instructed me to stay put, assuring me she was on her way down the stairs to escort me to her apartment. I complied with her request. As soon as I turned off the car, 2 men appeared seemingly out of nowhere. They opened the door, dragged me out, and began to beat me mercilessly without a word. I was knocked to the ground, and the assault continued. They searched me, taking my wallet, my watch, and my gold graduation ring. Then, they got into the car and seized everything of value they could find, including my laptop and cell phone. After that, they fled into the darkness, leaving me with nothing. In the alley, I found myself bewildered as to why my car remained untouched after the guys left. All I could do was lie on the pavement, curled up, overwhelmed by the intensity of the pain. I lacked the strength to even call for help, and each attempt to sit up only led me to collapse again. So, I remained there for a while, waiting to regain some semblance of strength. Eventually, I managed to get into my car and drive to the nearest hospital. During the journey, I fell on the verge of fainting more than once, the pain gripping me tightly. I experienced a sharp pain in my ribs, but thankfully, I managed to reach the hospital. There, I received emergency care, and after undergoing a few x-rays, it was revealed that I had a couple of broken ribs, one of which was perilously close to puncturing my right lung. Additionally, I had significant bruising across various areas of my body. Following the appropriate treatment and a regimen of painkillers, I was discharged 2 days later, with a doctor advising complete rest for the next 2 weeks. Fortunately, the day after the incident, a friend stepped in to help me out. After purchasing a new cell phone, I managed to update my bank and credit card passwords, as well as the passwords for my social media accounts, to prevent any unauthorized access to my finances or potential scams targeting my friends. I checked my WhatsApp, hoping to see a message from Marta after the robbery, wishing she had no involvement. However, our conversation had vanished, and her number was blocked. Additionally, her Tinder profile was gone, revealing it was all a deception, and I had fallen into the trap. This has undoubtedly been the worst experience. Throughout my experiences, both in dating and in life, I continue to use Tinder. However, I've become much more cautious when meeting someone new, always opting for public places for our first encounters. Hope your day is brimming with wellness and joy. I invite you to subscribe to my channel for captivating tales of true horror stories.